We are Fandom Roulette.
Two nerds with a passion for
History,
video games,
tabletop games,
and, well, really any nerdy stuff that comes into our lives.
While we might not be able to name every ship classification in Star Wars,
Or every Pokemon.
or every spell in the player's handbook,
Well, one of us can.
we're still here to have a good time. Hey everyone, welcome to Fan Roulette. This is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And on Fan Roulette, it's the podcast where we talk about a myriad of nerdy things. Those things will sometimes include history, video games, tabletop role-playing games, and whatever nerdy stuff we thought about or want to talk about in the episode as we go along. Nice clean open. So anyway, Cody, what nerdy stuff have you been up to?
Nerdy stuff? Oh boy. A lot, actually. Well, I mean, as much as I can. This is where my job gets incredibly busy, so...
Yep.
So, you know, the usual stuff. But last night, the new Destiny 2 expansion came out. So I've been playing a little bit of that, and I'm kind of prepping and playing games for Season 5.
Aha.
Nice. Yes, because it's the end of this season.
Yes.
This
Welcome
is the
to
finale.
finale.
Yeah.
Hooray, finale vibes. Look at that.
Love it.
Who's gonna die?
Oh no. I don't think I did good in the polls. I think the judges are gonna kick me off the island.
It's real sword of Damocles. Is this a sword of Damocles? I don't actually know what that is.
I don't know.
A real this is gonna be a through line, I think, for the episode. Is
Yes.
who's gonna get voted off the island. The executive producers are sitting in here. They're like looking at me all weird. They're eyeing the
all
computer
like
a lot.
confused.
Well, here's the thing: is the computer's been testing really well, I think.
Oh shit.
Yeah, so I might be replaced by a computer, and it's like cool because
Whoa.
he can like record in my attic, which is great. Because he's already up here.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway,
but beyond that, we had a D&D session that went really well.
It did. It was great.
I can't wait to talk about that in the campaign diary.
Hell yeah.
And I've been prepping stuff that we'll probably talk about in the middle section. So lots of behind the scenes stuff. Actually, it's been a couple weeks. I've been enjoying it though.
Would you say that it's been a while? I'm not gonna
copyright, but I wanna.
It's been a while. I don't think we're gonna get copyrighted for that.
Wow,
so you
I
are in the
spiked
clear.
that audio.
Yeah, right. It was like a fucking volleyball game.
Yes, it was.
And now everyone's gone. We can just be ourselves now.
Oh yeah, all the normies left.
They referenced the sport, so we're out because we thought this was a nerd shit podcast.
Right.
They're talking about that most masculine of sports, volleyball.
Yeah. Love it.
No offense to volleyball players, by the way. Volleyball rules.
I love volleyball.
Yeah, volleyball rules. I'm digging myself into a hole right now.
Hold on.
It's a nice hole.
Top Gun.
Look at this.
Top Gun, volleyball.
Top Gun.
Enough said.
Wow. Damn. That Top Gun, Tom Cruise.
Volleyball.
Enough. No. I'm trying to Kevin Bacon it.
Oh.
I'm not gonna actually do that. If I think of one, I'll just jump in and interrupt the podcast.
Anyways, what nerdy stuff have you been up to, my dude?
Oh man, I saw a great American classic over the weekend.
Yes.
I saw my friend was in a production of Arthur Miller's classic The Crucible.
Okay. I don't know what
which
that
I had
is.
never.
Tell me a little bit about it.
It's about 3 hours long. But I'm saying. It is a play about, well, it actually weirdly enough thematically works with like my little whole shtick I was doing this season in the history section. It was a play that was written in the 50s, I want to say, and it was about the Salem witch trials, but it was also about like McCarthyism and like mob mentality and shit. And so, like, yeah, like, our protagonist, John Proctor, is like, I don't believe in no witches. And then these, like, girls are like, but there are witches. And everyone's like, oh shit, there might be witches, because, like, these young ladies are saying it, and young women are incapable of lying. And then, like, yeah, it was good. It was just long, man.
That's the problem with, like, good. It feels like a lot of good things are long.
I mean, it's near the end, it got very shouty.
Right.
Where it was just like, I am John Proctor, and witches are bad, and I was like, yep, good one, John Proctor.
Damn.
That's the name of the protagonist of the play.
Yeah.
Kind of. He also slept with like a child in the play. That's part of like the plot. Yeah. And then other nerdy stuff, I started playing a video game.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm stepping into your territory.
How dare you? I'm
the
video game. Just the video game. That's what I
forgot. You're the no. I started playing this game called
video game.
Started playing this game called Slay the Spire.
Yes.
Which is very good, and I got very addicted very quickly to it. As soon as like things started happening, and I was like, oh shit, this game's making a lot of sense. I was hanging out at a friend's house, and he was like, try out this video game, and I was like, okay. And then like, I showed up early because they live a little ways away, but like we were gonna play Scion, which is a role playing game I've mentioned on the podcast before. And he was like, oh man, and like people started showing up, and I was still playing a game, and I was just sitting there in silence. He was like, don't mind Joe, like he just started playing this game, and he's like kind of addicted right now. And then like I looked up, and it was like an hour and a half later, and I was like, oh shit.
Damn, that's how I feel anytime a new game comes out. I'll like put it to, I'll start playing it, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, several hours later, and feels like no time has passed.
Yeah, it's really good. It's on Steam. Check it out.
Is it free or does it cost money?
No, it costs money.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was a free to play game or not.
I believe it's like at the moment it's like $25, but I'm probably gonna wait till the Steam sale until I buy it for myself.
Yeah.
Because Steam's like, here's a free game basically, and I was like, thank you. Yeah, that's like the biggest, dirtiest things for me. It's like a couple of trailer drops recently. There's the new Harley Quinn trailer that came out.
I haven't seen that yet. I wasn't. I didn't catch it by name, or I didn't see the image of it. So when I saw the video or the movie title, I was like, I don't know what this is, so I'm not gonna watch it.
It's a fucking mouthful.
Yeah, it's Birds of Prey or something.
It's the Birds of Prey and like the like sensational like emancipation of Harley Quinn or something like that.
So I only read like I think I was like just flipping through Reddit, and it was just like Birds of Prey, the emancipation, and then it was like ... and I was like, that's too long, and so I just scrolled past it, and so I didn't realize it was the Harley Quinn movie. I'll have to watch it sometime this weekend.
It looks interesting.
Yeah, I mean, does it look similar in vein to Suicide Squad? I assume it's being made like by the same ish people.
No. Well, I will say, the thing about Suicide Squad is Suicide Squad admittedly does have one of the slickest trailers that was like ever made.
Yeah, it was a pretty dope trailer. It made me see it.
For a movie that wasn't very good. In fact, perhaps actively bad.
Okay.
Man, I don't know. Like, I don't know. It was interesting.
Okay.
I'll wait for reviews. It's got people in it that I like.
Well, that's good. That's always a good start.
I like Margot Robbie. I think she's talented. It's got Mary Elizabeth Winstead, I think her name is. She's been into a lot of stuff I've liked. It's got fucking Ewan McGregor in it.
Okay.
I'm always glad to see him around. Just like Hank showing up. Man, I feel like I'm sounding very apathetic about this.
Yeah, it does kind of sound like you lost your soul when I asked you about this. Like, did somebody come over and pay you to not shit on this movie?
Yeah. Cha-ching.
You just
and then I open it up and
shuffle. What is that? Oh, that's not the check from whoever owns the rights to this movie.
Warner Brothers.
I thought it was Warner Brothers, but I didn't want to be a fool.
See, because I was going to open up the bag and be like, oh no, it's full of carrots. No.
Stop that. Get out. Show's over.
What's up, Doc?
Stop. No,
I gotta beg
you can't do that.
What? That really bad Bugs Bunny?
Yes, the word.
No one's gonna know. Was it Bugs Bunny or is it a bad like gangster from like a bad parody 50s movie? No one will know, Cody.
Actually, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference unless you hear what Bugs Bunny has to say. If you think about it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, one day animation, I love it. So anyways, that's the shit I've been up to. Shall we dive into the segments and such?
Yeah, the season finale of this history section, which still doesn't have like a name.
It's
like usually we have like a name, but this one was kind of like seeing the future through the lens of the past.
Yeah, that's a good
That's
name.
actually pretty good. Damn.
Yeah, pat yourself on the back there, Cody.
So tell me about the lenses.
Well, I kind of like set up like a two-parter in the last time we did like a normal episode that we weren't talking about Marvel.
Yes, you
did.
The
whole time. Where I was talking a little bit about like anthology shows, and one of the reasons that I kind of did this segment overall, or this season the way I did it, was because there was a thing that was said about a television program that made me really interested in watching it, which was like, it's like the Twilight Zone for our time. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So this is a
that sounds like the Twilight Zone remake that they did.
I've not actually watched any of the Twilight Zone reboot.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard mixed things.
Yeah, which is kind of fascinating because it's interesting because like, yeah, it's an anthology show, right? And so like, you might have mixed things. I've heard that one of the things about it is they're trying to do like reduxes of like classic episodes.
Right.
Which is fine, but like also like putting their own twist on it. So it's like at that point it's like, why are you putting in the effort to like
to make a nod to it? I feel like if you're gonna do that, at least with modern day season episodes, which is like typically like 12, 13, 14-ish region, I would say if you have 12 episodes and you're going to do that, you get one.
Sure, yeah.
Or maybe two, but I feel like if you're especially if you're like a big fan, like 2 of those episodes and kind of retreading old tales and getting the exact same thing, but like, oh, but it's done in modern day green screens or whatever, feels very cheap.
Well, and also the fact too that it's like, but it also pulls the rug underneath you, and like the thing that you expected is different. But anyway, we're getting off topic.
Yes,
just kidding. It's never happened before.
Never.
But so we're talking about the television program Black Mirror.
I've heard of this show, but I have not watched it.
Sure, yeah. So like yeah, as I kind of talked about with the Twilight Zone. You know, it uses the lens of science fiction to tell contemporary stories that were talking about things like race and racism, you know, mob mentality, other problems of the 1950s and the 1960s. And I kind of want to like go into a kind of overarching like theoretical tangent kind of about this section. So like, okay. I kind of had a thesis about this miniseries, which I feel like I did okay at, but I'd maybe like to repass at it later. Which is that I'm trying to like showcase that all sources should be considered valid. But if they were made in the time period. So
Interesting. I want you to let's dive into that a little bit. Tell me what you mean by that.
So for too long, there were like 5 things that were considered like actual sources for historical analysis. And people might dock me on this because it's actually, at this point, we've been using things like this for a good long while. But for like, I would say the majority of history, we were looking mainly at things like letters, journals, newspaper clippings, things like that. Occasionally, like the texts of plays might have been included. Sometimes there was debate about whether or not art should be included into this, and there is its own kind of subfield of art history. But after World War II, there was this kind of growing movement that's referred to today as like postmodernism. And they were kind of arguing for like a wider definition and delineation of what like could be considered a historical source, right? And one of the big debates about this is like with you, what your definition of what is considered a historic source, you are excluding so much history, right? Because if you look at the past, like who tended to be people who didn't leave behind letters and journals and things like that? It's people who were illiterate or underliterate, women, oftentimes minorities, poor people and things like that. And so people started asking the question, well, should we ignore these people because they didn't leave behind what we consider to be historically valid texts, right? It's kind of this like messed up thing. And so this kind of gets like a secondary or a secondary name, which sometimes is referred to as cultural history, which is also a very difficult thing because his culture is also kind of a weird thing. There's like so many layers to what can and cannot be considered culture. And it's something that is changing, and it's something that is kind of nebulous. And at its core, culture is something that is very difficult for us to know because we did not experience it. So it's likely that cultural history might be one that goes through more like permeations, or it might be more things that are kind of debunked or removed from the narrative. But that's also kind of a great thing. I'd also argue too that like the traditional style of doing history has its own problems as well. Like, you know, so many people looked at the world through kind of a heteronormative lens or a lens of a certain gender identity, which kind of has skewed our views of history. You know, there's probably countless examples of LGBT history that have been like relegated to things like, oh, well, she was a spinster, or he was a confirmed bachelor, or they were roommates, or they were just friends. And that kind of erases the history of what could be considered like a long-lasting and loving, you know, homosexual relationship. So it's not to suggest that cultural history is super bad because it's misinterpreting history. People have been misinterpreting history for years. And history is one of those things that can and should change over time, especially as we get new perspectives and fresh perspectives. If history was already written, then I'd be out of a job. And quite frankly, I don't like that very much. Every time we learn, every time we move forward, we grow and we change our definition of history. And I want to ask you a question, Cody.
Yes, hit me.
So there's this ancient peoples that lived in, I believe it was Peru, and they were called the Wari. Now, the Wari didn't have a written language system as far as we're aware, but we do know that they had a way of communicating with one another which involved knotted ropes. And we don't know exactly how to translate it. People are still trying to figure that out. But in the old school version of history, this would be considered unimportant or unworthy of being analyzed. Do you think that's fair?
No, because the people who write the history books, or, people who wrote down stuff. Like, who's to say they didn't have anything to hide?
Yeah, exactly.
It's often, I don't know who quoted this, but like, history is written by who wins the wars, or whatever the actual quote is. So like,
yeah,
we're only seeing
by the
history from, a very kind of focalized, like very distinct perspective of one group of like individuals. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the idea that this, you said they're from Peru?
Yeah.
This tribe had, or, this civilization, let's not degrade it, had a super, like, unique and interesting way to communicate using rope. That's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And of course that's history. History is just what humanity has gone through. And, I guess I have a very super broad term of that, but like that makes sense to me, because the stuff in history books, like, we find out most times in college that the stuff we learn in high school is all a fucking lie anyways.
Yeah, or a simplistic version of something.
Yeah, or like super simplistic and skewed. So yeah, of course that's history. That's super awesome and interesting.
Mm-hmm. And so this cultural turn, like I said, they started arguing that there should be things, like, we should be looking at things that are not traditional sources. So we should be looking at things like movies and films and comic books and novels and art and all of these things that were kind of cast aside because, oh, well, that's just like a fairy story or a fairy tale, right? And the postmodernists are like, no, we need to look at this because they can kind of reveal more information to us than people were willing to write down. Because, if you look at the Brothers Grimm's, there's all kinds of aspects of things like how parents can keep control, and like the don't go into the woods aspect of the narrative, what people feared and what people respected and what power looked like. And so that was kind of my whole thing behind this, is we can look to the past and we can look to the stories of the past to see how they were talking about their own society, which maybe sometimes even people in the past might not have been privy to. And so with that, I wanted to talk a little bit about Black Mirror. So I would argue that there might be some people who might be a little upset at this because it is not technically history yet, because it's looking at our world. But I kind of wanted to use this as a way to showcase how cultural history kind of can work in action. Because I kind of looked at this and I wanted to talk about it from kind of like a good perspective, or like a good perspective, a bad perspective, and kind of showcase like how one can interpret something like this and how one might in the future might interpret it as well. So just a little bit of background on the show. It started in 2011 and aired on the BBC. It was developed by Charlie Booker, who was an English screenwriter, but he also has a lot of other things associated with his name. So, he's like a humorist. He wrote books. He writes, editorials, things like that. But he was, as a child, he was a fan of The Twilight Zone because he was impressed how I was able to like kind of sneak in these ideas from the 60s, and especially to get it past like censorship. Because censorship in the 60s was much higher, but they were able to kind of tell these stories almost covertly and sneakily. He thought that was pretty cool. And so as he was developing Black Mirror, he wanted to do a similar thing. He wanted to make an anthology show with individual stories and new casts and different directors and things like that. And so I found a quote from the British newspaper The Guardian, and I can provide a link for this as well. He said, "If technology is a drug, and it does feel like a drug, then what precisely are the side effects? This area, between delight and discomfort, is where Black Mirror, my new drama series, is set. The Black Mirror of the title is the one you find on every wall, on every desk, in the palm of every hand. The cold, shiny screen of a TV, a monitor, a smartphone." So some light spoilers for a couple of episodes here and there. Just fair warning, but there were episodes that ranged from a dystopian society where people peddled bikes to earn something called merits, which was kind of this world's currency, and it allowed you to get things like food, clothes for this little avatar that you would see, the ability to skip ads, or the ability to go onto a reality show and rise above your station. Another follows a grieving wife who buys a product which is basically an AI that is designed to think and sound like your lost loved one. And then another one still follows a lonely, nerdy computer programmer who is secretly pretty much a monster. It has built a private channel that looks and feels like classic Star Trek to punish those who've wronged him and live out some like pretty gross sexual fantasies. I argue that the show is really well acted. I think that the show is pretty well written, although there are some people that might disagree with me on this. And like other anthology shows, it has some really good episodes and some really bad episodes. For instance, the one where the guy's pedaling the bike to earn merits. I had a hard time falling asleep the night I watched it. It just wouldn't leave my mind. And there's a one that was pretty bad. There's one where this guy voices a CGI bear that wins the prime ministership. That one's kind of all over the place. But the show gets a fair amount of praise. I think it won a couple of awards. I'm not 100% sure. It's at least been nominated. It's also gotten a fair amount of criticism. And so there's a popular meme where it will take like an image, like a Roomba with a knife taped to it, and then they put the Black Mirror logo next to it, which I think is kind of funny. But I think that this is kind of where we get into how cultural history can work, and how cultural history might, be bad as well. So, I think that Booker's kind of onto something with this idea of the addictive nature of a tech-heavy world. There are sometimes feelings of isolation, how it warps our reality and our minds. But in a way, it also kind of feels like a boomer-level criticism of technology. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, there are some episodes that get into some nuance. Like, there are, a lot of times the problem isn't the tech itself, but how we use the tech. So, for instance, an example of that one is everyone has this thing that's implanted into their eye where you're allowed to play back, like a scene from a party or, something that you did previously and things like that. And what happens in that episode is, that technology is not evil, but it's the way that this man continues to view his interactions of his wife with other people, where he gets progressively more jealous. And of course, he's only seeing it from his perspective, and he can't hear the conversations that she's having sometimes and things like that. But at the same time, it's also feels very much like it's get off your phone, you dang kids. It doesn't explore systemic prejudices. It's kind of colorblind and gender blind to a point, but it doesn't do anything with it. For instance, there's an example of an episode where the big twist is that it's an elaborate punishment for a woman of color, and I found myself asking the question, would they do the same thing if it was like a white woman? Things like that. And one last thing before I kind of get into the way that it works is, I also think that a big criticism about it is that it ignores the benefits of technology. I think it's easy to point out a lot of the wrongs of technology, but, technology allows people who literally don't have the ability to speak. It gives them the ability to make their voices heard. You look at someone like Stephen Hawking or something, how he's able to use that computer to communicate with others. It allows people who might be somewhere on the autism spectrum to type onto a screen what they're thinking or what they're feeling without being able to verbally communicate it. In some aspects as well, it allows people to truly represent who they are if they might not be comfortable feeling safe and admitting that in front of their family and their friends. I know a lot of times people will take like the first steps of transitioning as like a trans person, like online, where they have a little community that they've built to feel safe. There are benefits to technology as well. So looking forward, what is the legacy of Black Mirror going to be? When people watch it and when people use Black Mirror to write the history of the 21st century, is it going to be about a group of people who have used and abused technology to the point of driving themselves literally insane? Is it going to be that this was a lost generation that was so obsessed with the technology that we used? Will they see the nuances in it and see that the problem wasn't the technology, but it was with the people? Or will they eventually tell a story where it's a group of people? There's an episode where that kind of deals with this a little bit, but will they ever tell stories that showcase the benefit of technology as well? Now, one last thought, and then I'll open the floor for a little bit of discussion if you'd like. I think that Twilight Zone sometimes gets a bad rap. That people think of it as like a horror show. That people think of it as a twist show and things like that. But that show had episodes that were sometimes very sardonic and sometimes very funny. He had as many episodes with happy endings as he did with sad or scary or depressive endings. And I think that it showcases a full picture. While he was using his platform to criticize systemic problems and things like that, he was also using it to showcase good in the world, or sometimes happiness, or sometimes stories of just childhood fantasy or escapism. Black Mirror, I think, doesn't necessarily do that. Most of it is pretty grim. Of all the episodes I've personally seen, I've seen 4 of the 5 seasons. I can think of 2 that might have something that are considered happy endings. But it also drives home this idea of mass hysteria, of creating a fake person behind that screen. And so I'd like to see them, maybe do more, maybe add a little bit of sardonic. Obviously he has a mission and he has a mission statement, and he's able, he can showcase that, but how is the future going to view Black Mirror? How are people, 30 years from now when they're writing a podcast, when they look at, Black Mirror, what are they going to think about the society that we built? And how can something like this be viewed in the future? So that's kind of this, right? That's kind of my final thoughts are that everything I said this season could be misinterpretation. It could be disproven 10 years from now or something like that. But it's this idea that when we look at something like this, it allows us to give an idea of what people of the time might be thinking, but not necessarily gives us the whole story, which is kind of cool because that means that history can continue to grow. And so, yeah, that's my soapbox. Any questions?
Damn. I wasn't expecting this when I logged on today. Shit.
Yeah, dropped the hammer.
Love it. I can't wait to listen to it again when I edit it. Shit. Not questions. I mean, I have heard similar things about how it's pretty much a downer, Black Mirror, and I also heard that it gets worse as time progresses, like in terms of quality and like how the story's written. Do you agree with those reviews that like there's a certain point where Black Mirror just is kind of like riding its own curtails of being like, technology is bad, this is how bad things get, and like just keeps spinning into this kind of like, all right, we get it, like we don't need this anymore kind of a thing? Or do you think it has something a little more than that? Or is there something more to Black Mirror as you progress through the seasons? Or is it more or less just technology is bad, or the way we use technology is horrible, like we should really like get our heads out of our asses kind of a thing?
So there's an episode called like San Junipero, which is basically like, it tells the story of these 2 young women falling in love. And then you find out that it's a completely constructed digital space. And that the one woman is very, very old, and that the one woman is in a coma. And that one has like a happy ending. Like I said, that one's like kind of goes to the idea of technology allowing us to kind of express our true selves. Because you find out that the woman, or no, she's not in a coma, she's paralyzed. And I believe what happens is like she comes out to her parents and she's initially rejected. This could all be misremembering, by the way, if this is misremembering. But I mean, the basic like overarching idea is she gets injured after she like comes out in the real world, and so this allows her to like kind of build. I think there are interesting episodes here or there. I think there are also some very bad episodes, but I think that's kind of the risk you take with an anthology show, right?
Yeah, I mean, not everything can be a winner, but
yeah, like
it was just weird because it was very weird because the reviews I heard is like those first 3 seasons are amazing and like totally like whoa, like the writing is just incredible, and then like it feels like people are over it by season 4 or 5. And that's why people are kind of reviewing it bad. So like I was curious if you think the end of, or not the end, because I'm sure there's going to be more, but like seasons 4 and 5 still kind of hold up, or is this a case of like, okay, you've done the anthology long enough, people understand what you're trying to say, kind of a thing?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that happened is that Netflix buys it.
Okay.
And so, like British television, love it or hate it, has a certain sensibility to it, where it's like the first 3 seasons are 3 episodes apiece, and they're all about an hour to an hour and a half long. And then seasons 4, 5, and 6, I believe, are 6 or 7 episodes apiece. So, one asks a question, maybe is this just a case of like they're trying to do too much? Does Charlie Booker not have the same level of involvement that he once had? Does Charlie Booker have too much level of involvement? This is something I don't know from an outsider's perspective. I think I've seen all of season 4, I've seen all of season 5. I think they both have their highlights and their lowlights. There's like the first episode of season 4 was written by Parks and Rec and The Good Place creator Mike Schur and Rashida Jones, and it's about this woman. Okay, so just the briefest setup, and it's a very eye-rolling setup, by the way. I fully acknowledge this. That there is this app that pretty much controls your entire life. And it's kind of like this weird combination of Instagram and Uber, where you post things, and then based on how many likes you get, then your kind of social capital goes up in the world. And so this woman is trying to move into this really, really glitzy, bougie apartment, but her score is like 2,000 points short or something like that. And this woman goes crazy trying to raise this 2,000 points, which should be done over, like a, maybe 2-3 year period overnight, practically. And so it's kind of an eye-rolling premise, but it asks some interesting questions about like how we present ourselves on the internet and what is real and what is fake. And I think it's because in that case, there were 2 really smart people writing it. I think it ends up being a little bit better, but there's another episode where, there's this kid who basically is, like how old people will put tape over their laptop cameras because they don't want to be watched.
Yeah.
Basically, the premise of the episode is that this kid is caught like watching. I think he's like basically being outed, and so he gets these series of things that he has to do, and if he doesn't do it by a certain period of time, then it's going to be emailed to all of his friends and all of his family and things like that. And he's working along with this other person, and the big twist at the end is that this guy isn't actually the person who's harassing them, and that there's actually this gigantic like network of people just harassing one another. And it's like that one's like not super great because I don't think it's executed very well. So I think it's all based on the information. I think it's going to keep going. I think it's going to get progressively worse. I think people are going to keep rolling their eyes at it. I think that season 4 was still pretty good, and I think kind of from that point it's starting to slowly decline. So, yeah.
Well, at least I know to watch up to season 4.
Yeah, I will say, like the episode, like I said, the episode like 15 Million Merits, I think it's called, kept me up at night. The episode White Bear is also really good. There's some winners, there's some losers. Kind of go from there, but yeah. Now shall we venture into our own Black Mirror? Going into the
middle section.
Hey everyone, welcome to the middle section.
Welcome.
This is where we tell you about our social medias and such.
Right.
Do you want to start off with the big announcement or save it to the end?
Let's save it to the end. I'll announce it at the end of the middle section.
Ooh, another thread. The executives are nodding their heads. They like this one.
Ooh, they do. They love the twist and suspension.
Hey, Cody, I wanted to send you guys a tweet with the funny thought I had about your show or something nerdy that I've been up to lately. How might I do that?
You can tweet at us at fandomar_podcast. That is our Twitter handle.
Yeah, and I want to tell Joe what a dolt he is for his Black Mirror opinion, so I want to write out a very long email. How can I send you guys an email?
First, loved your use of dolt. Second, you can email us at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com.
Oh, very cool. But Cody, I don't want you guys to have my email, because who knows what people do with emails anymore.
It's true.
How can I contact you guys without giving you my email?
Well, you can go to our website at www.fanroulette.com, where we have all of our episodes and a little bio page for Joe and myself, and little snippets from the episode. And then if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a little contact section where you can put your handle if you want us to, mention you, and if we mention something that you talk about, or if you don't, doesn't matter. But in that area, you can write your dissertation to Joe about what adult he is and all that good stuff. And it doesn't require your email.
Very nice. Hey, Cody, I want to tell my friends about Fandom Roulette. And I know where I personally found you, but where are some other places where they can find you?
Well, we're on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play,
Nice.
Spotify, and drumroll,
Ooh.
we're on YouTube.
What?
Yeah. It's going to take us a little bit to get caught up, but coming very soon in another middle section, you will find out when we will be caught up, and on every Thursday night-ish, or every other Thursday night, we will not only be posting to our normal podcast areas, but also on YouTube.
Very nice.
But if you really enjoy YouTube and you want people to kind of catch up on all the stuff, you can start watching our content now. We've got the first 10 episodes live.
Woo!
Yeah.
Okay. And then what are some other social media sites that you guys are on?
We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter, like we already said. We are on MySpace. We're on GeoCities.
We're on Angel
We're
Fire.
on your Discord channels, secretly just sitting there breathing into the microphone.
Yeah. Catch us on your Telegraph.
Yes, tell us. We're also on channel 72, where it's like the weird cooking shows or the infomercials. We're sitting there in the audience.
Put one of Mr. Edison's wax cylinders on your phonograph.
Yes.
How's that phonograph machine working, Cody?
I broke mine.
Shit.
I
take that back. Don't do that last one. Yeah. Hey,
yeah, just screaming at this point.
Shall we just get back into the content?
Yeah.
All right. Oof, that history section got a little heavy, I think.
It did, but I really liked it. I think that's a good finale. I wish my finale for the video game section was that good.
I'm sure it'll be awesome. What movie did you watch, bud?
I'd watched the best. I'd watched Super Mario Brothers.
Oh yeah.
I had watched considerably what's considered the worst.
Okay.
And so
Warcraft?
I actually wanted to start off with one that I was actually kind of excited to watch because I heard literally nothing about it, but I really liked the series to a certain degree. So I watched Assassin's Creed, the movie that came out in 2016 by 20th Century Fox.
No, I've heard interesting things about this one. What did you think?
So, okay, a little setup. Assassin's Creed is a game that came out, or its first iteration came out in 2007. This is a fucking old game. I graduated high school when this game came out. And you'd be surprised, the general premise of it is actually super cool. There are two secret organizations fighting over, history itself. The Templars is this religious order that has kind of this weird mindset of obedience from all people, and this other organization, the Assassins, they're kind of morally ambiguous, but their intent is to stop the Templars in order to keep the purest essence of freedom. And this goes on for generations until somebody discovers how to basically unlock DNA to show you the past using this device called the Animus. But it only works with your bloodline. So it kind of creates this interesting situation where, like, if you were, like, the descendant of, like, somebody famous that had descendants, you could actually go back and relive those memories with this machine. And it's a super cool premise, and there's a lot of intriguing ways to do it. There's, like, the idea of spies and assassins and using it through all the different courses of history. There's lots of unique ways to do this. And then in 2016, they made this movie.
Ooh. Whoa. Nice. I like the hammer drop on that.
Yeah. The movie got a 5.7 on IMDb.
Okay.
I'll start with the good, because this one's probably going to be pretty short.
Okay.
The movie was fun.
Okay.
There were some cool parkour chase scenes, and there's some fights. Although, so the way the Animus works in the movie is it's this giant, like, crane arm machine that you, like, kind of hook into, and the machine kind of, like, tries to mimic what you're doing in the past. So in the movie, whenever they go into the past, which is a poor premise at best, there is a town in Spain, ? I can't even remember where it takes place, the past, but
I believe it was the Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah, and so there's, like, one king who is kind of being openly defiant against, the empire of the Templars, who is probably somebody. I'm not a good history person. That's why Joe does this. But basically, the nuts and bolts is the Templars want to steal the prince of this unruly king so that he will give up the secrets to this mystic item called the Apple of Eden, which the whole movie, it's just like it unlocks the genetic code of humans' disobedience. And it's like this weird kind of, like, I don't know. They make it believe it's some kind of rare, or not rare, but, like, artifact from a long lost super advanced civilization.
Yeah, wasn't it kind of shit?
Well, it's not aliens. In the game, like, the big twist is that there was an ancient, before our civilization, there was another civilization that was super highly advanced. And they all died off for some reason, but they left these, like, powerful artifacts because, everything got destroyed or whatever. And these artifacts are from this ancient civilization before life itself, but people were turning them into, certain religious texts. Like the Apple of Eden is very, the Christian, story of, how we wear clothes and shit.
Yeah.
So they do the same thing in this movie, but, like, every time they cut to the past, there's always these, like, jump cuts to Michael Fassbender doing these moves in the Animus. And it's probably their cheap way of making the stunts more doable. But, like, It's super jarring, and it makes most of the scenes, like, they're just okay,
Okay.
The premise is still really cool, but they're so heavy-handed about the Secret War that you literally learn nothing about the actual people who are involved.
Okay.
So, there you have it. Those are the good parts. It's kind of a fun movie, but that's about it.
Oh, boy.
Pretty much everything else is garbage.
Oh, boy.
So, the characters are non-existent besides their names, and I wish I could put, like, air quotes behind that, because through the movie, and maybe it's because I was so distracted with, like, how boring the movie got, but I don't even know the character's full name until the very end.
Oh.
Because people were just calling him Cal, and it's like, okay, he's Cal. But his full name is Cal Lynch. And, like, his quote-unquote character traits is that he's super violent, but we don't really see that in the movie, except for, like, he was on death row for murdering somebody. So, like, we are told that he's violent.
2019 or 2016 or whatever? When that movie came out? Okay.
2016, yeah.
Like it's the modern day storyline, not the Templar.
Correct.
Or the Assassin storyline.
Oh yeah, cool. No. Everything I'm going to talk about at this point is the future parts, because that's really where the story lies in this one. Like, the past scenes are cool, but their whole point of using the past is to find this apple, who one of Cal's descendants was like the last person to hold it.
Okay.
So in the future, there's the main character who is the descendant of one of the assassins, and like he's just violent, and like his whole thing is like he's really pissed off because as a kid he saw, like, what he saw, quote unquote, was his dad murdering his mother, and then his dad being like, blah blah blah, the assassins, you have to run. Okay. And like that's all we get. And so it's kind of this like mix between I don't really know what's going on to this kind of revenge quest to finally, like, you know, meet and kill his dad.
Whoa. That's
and heavy. Then, yeah, and these aren't character traits. Like,
no,
being violent because your mother was murdered is, like, the most, like, basic-ass shit that I could come up with as, like, a 10-year-old.
Hey, good... Bad anti-heroes have past trauma.
Right, but, like, everyone has past trauma. The people who don't are weird. And end up being the villains anyways. Like...
Ooh. Good take.
Yeah, hot take. But no, like, everyone's got shit. Everyone's got baggage. Like, make it interesting at the very least. And, like, the twist is that, like, this whole time you think he's just gonna, like, say fuck it to the assassins who spent their entire lives and basically shed their character, quote unquote, to like follow this creed of like stopping the Templars because they're super big and powerful. And then of course he like right at the end he changes his mind because he sees his mom and like other assassins in the Animus, and they're like, here's the creed, and it's super like nothing is permitted, freedom, blah blah blah. It's like it's so like it's super heavy-handed, and then like there's two other characters that are like kind of important, and then like the rest of the characters they introduce like once or twice are basically like, I'm a plot development that's going to pay off later for 5 seconds, and that's it. And so, like, the other character is the doctor who helped create the Animus, and this is, like, her project. And, of course, her dad is a part of the Templars, and he's kind of like, you gotta do this quicker. They're gonna cut our budget. And so, like...
Damn.
And she's all about
part of the
science.
Assassin's Creed games.
Yeah, my favorite part...
was the budget talk.
Right, and it's just bad, because, like, she's so... uninteresting. She's just there to be just to explain how this Animus thing works, and like all like there's like this kind of bleeding effect where if you're in the Animus for too long, you'll see the like you'll start hallucinating about your past and shit like that. And like she's literally just there to exposit the story, and then, you know, right at the end, the main character gets the apple back, kills her dad, who's like showing it off, and is like, haha, I'm the greatest. And even though he literally does nothing but gives the main character basically a stab to kill his dad. That was a bad joke, but
I liked it. It took me a second. It was a thinker.
And so of course he doesn't actually stab his dad. He's just kind of like, well, do something, like, don't be a fucking waste. And leaves. So like, he doesn't actually end up killing his dad, which is like supposed to be like his character growth. But the whole movie is him being in this, like, in the past, or like jump cutting from the past to like more things about the assassin. Like, this movie does such a great job at explaining this fucking secret war that they forgot that they were trying to tell another story underneath it, and that one's bad.
Yeah, that sounds pretty bad.
And of course, at the very end, main character kills the dad, grabs the item, and leaves. And then she's all of a sudden like, oh, you killed my dad, now I'm gonna get you. But the thing is before that, she sees him coming in and they have a conversation, and he's like, you can help us, like, you can put a stop to what your dad's doing. And she's like, no, I can't. And then just kind of like stands there, and he's like, all right, and then leaves. And then all of a sudden she's like, I'm going to kill him for killing my dad. And it's like, you literally have no character, and like, why do I give a fuck about this person who suddenly like has a death wish for the person she helped or whatever? Like, it's just like a bunch of... Yeah, well, yeah, of course they're setting up a sequel, but it fucking sucked.
And it's probably not going to happen.
Right, and so like... And this is like the reverse example of the Super Mario Brothers movie. I feel like Super Mario isn't a good movie concept. I think you have to do a lot to the Super Mario concept in order to make a good movie. I feel like Assassin's Creed is the opposite. I think there's a lot of ways to make this interesting, but still feeling true to Assassin's Creed. Mm-hmm. Because like, you could do anything. And they're just like, nah, let's do these indescript parkour chase scenes through Spain or whatever, and some poorly cut fight scenes, and pretend like we needed Michael Fassbender in this movie. You could literally replace him with any other dude, and it would be the same movie. That's unfortunate. And I don't necessarily think that's like a knock at him. Because, like, I've seen him in movies that I like, and I liked his character. I just think that the movie was, like, they wrote it so, like, without the characters in mind, that they just were like, well, I guess I'll just read my lines and grab the paycheck, because there's nothing I can do about this. Like, it's bad all around. Like, I would recommend this if the fun parts of the movie, like the fighting and the parkour chase scenes were better, but like, I feel like other movies have done that better. So, I mean, here's the thing. If you're a diehard fan of Assassin's Creed, you might appreciate the nods that this movie gives, because they do give a lot of nods. And I do feel like a lot of like the intro is kind of like, hey, are you a fan of Assassin's Creed? Here you go. Here you go. There's another reference, and another, and another. But, like, that's it. I don't recommend this movie. I understand why it got a 5.7 out of 10. Yeah. It is. Even with the good parts, it's mediocre at best.
Damn.
I hate to be a downer on it. Like, here's the thing.
It makes sense.
Here's the thing. My expectations with this were pretty low, but not like Super Mario Brothers low. And the thing about Super Mario Brothers is I ended up liking it more. Mm-hmm. And then with this movie was the opposite. I had a little higher hopes than I did with like Super Mario Brothers, and it ended up being a lot worse than I expected. And I think that if I had to come away from season 4, like video game movies in general, I really don't think I think you need to keep the theme for a video game movie, but like, you can do whatever you want with it. I don't like, there are these video game movies that try to follow the script to a T, but like, most video games, I wouldn't say most. There are a lot of video games that have room to play in that space and make good stories and write interesting characters. And so you should do that. You should play with the space. But when there's no space to be played in, just throw it out. Do something different. I don't know. I was really happy with Detective Pikachu and Super Mario Brothers for sure. Like, those kind of turned me around, and I know that they can be made. Like, there can be good video game movies. I just think that you can't just do the, well, here's the movie. Like, you actually have to put some love into the movie and really think about what it is you're throwing at your audience. Because people aren't dumb, and I feel like making these movies, like, half-assed, like, shows, and that's why they do so bad. I don't know. You have any questions about my fucking tirade on fucking Assassin's Creed?
I mean, so I guess I'm going to answer your question with a question. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Do you think that it's possible to make a good video game movie?
Yes. I do think it's possible.
Because I personally have a couple of thoughts about this.
Yeah, I mean, like I said a little bit earlier, I think Detective Pikachu was made with a lot of love, and that shows, and I feel like that's why it's a really good movie if it's a little, campy and kind of like baby's first detective show. And then I feel like whoever wrote the Super Mario Brothers movie was on to something, but didn't give it enough love that it needed to be like that masterpiece.
Sure.
I think it's there, but I feel like with these AAA titles that are like, oh, we got this license for this game, people aren't putting the effort to make them good. If that makes sense.
It does, and I think the thing about Detective Pikachu, and I think one of the reasons that Detective Pikachu works so well, obviously it's made with a lot of love, but I also feel like there's no effort to make it look like they're doing the gameplay that we're used to.
Exactly, like the game itself, like the Pokemon game itself, like sure the battles might be cool in real time, but like that's kind of like that's like a video game thing, and I don't think every video game concept translates well to the TV. So you have to take what's good about those things and like work your magic to make them good.
Yeah, I think my thing too is another point is like video games have kind of reached this point where you have so much player agency that, like, I made a joke, they had talked about they were going to make a Mass Effect movie, right?
Right.
And it's like, well, they have to make like that's impossible because they'd have to make a million different versions of it, right? Because my shepherd is probably different from your shepherd, is different from a friend's shepherd, et cetera, right?
Yeah, I swear, I think I have like 6 different shepherds that I've run, and they all have been unique enough to warrant their own gameplay.
And so it's like, at the very least, you'd have to make 2 versions of the movie. You'd have to make a Paragon version, you'd have to make a Renegade version. Because if a Renegade person went in to see the Mass Effect movie and he was doing only Paragon things, they'd get pissed because that's not my shepherd. Right?
Yeah. And that's tough with video game movies. I think there's a pedestal that video game movies are put on before they even come out. And so I think quote unquote people who don't want to put in the effort will just be like, all right, well, we're just going to pump out a movie. Like, we're still going to get our paycheck. Like, it's not going to be great, but people are going to go see it. And then, that sucks because people have put so much time and effort into other types of movies. Like, I've seen amazing comic book movies or adaptations of books and things like that, where it's like, man, those were really crafted well, and like you can tell there was a lot of love put into it. But I feel like most of the time when it comes to a video game movie, it's just like, these fucking nerds will watch anything, and then they just kind of like throw together whatever. Like that's how my prediction right now, the 2nd of October 2019, Sonic the Hedgehog is gonna bomb and blow out in flames, and I will fucking eat my words if it turns out to be a fucking good movie.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for the sacrifice, Cody. we all appreciate it.
Yes, the labor that I put into watching these garbage movies and renting them on Amazon because I didn't own most of them.
All right. Well, shall we move into the last little bit?
Yeah, but before we get there, I got a game to play with you.
Would you like to play a game?
Yes. Oh, God.
Hi, it's me, Jigsaw. Yeah. Dude, yeah, okay, go on, Cody. Get me out of this bad impression hell.
Good. So we have moved on from using the garbage kid for the time being to play a fun new game we've created called You and a Group of Adventurers. And basically the idea is that we come up with some kind of fandom, pop culture, whatever it is, movie, comic books, video games, etc. We come up with a kind of elevator pitch to a RPG or a tabletop role-playing game campaign idea that you would pitch to your friends in something like a session 0, and then the other person and the audience tries to guess what it is.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
You and a group of adventurers are resistance fighters trying to save your new home from the empire you left behind. Your party consists of a mix of multi-class fighters / sorcerers and mostly fighters.
All right.
Well, now for our little session, or our little section right here, Joe can ask the type of media it is.
Yes.
And then I think one question. Is that how we're doing that?
I know we definitely do media.
Okay.
Is this a movie?
This is not a movie.
Okay.
This is a television show.
A television show.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so it's you and a group of adventurers.
Are resistance fighters.
Fighters.
Trying to save your new home from the empire you left behind. Your party consists of a mix of multi-class fighters / sorcerers and just general fighters.
Okay. Well, if you think you got the answer, tweet at us, hashtag fandom our adventures.
Yeah.
And we will read some of the people who got it right at the top of the, I guess, mini-sode, huh?
Yeah.
Huh. How about that?
Yeah, we'll reveal it in the mini episode too. So
sounds good.
Right. So yes. Do you have any ideas? I mean, you've got a while to think about it, but do you are you leaning into any directions?
Not necessarily, which is kind of interesting.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think that was just vague enough, but as soon as you hear the answer, you're going to be like, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, I know. That's the fun of the game, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
But anyway.
We're on our final section of our final episode of season 4 of our tabletop role-playing section, Magic. All the magics. Here we are a-gathering. Yeah, we've talked about all sorts of stuff from different different schools of magic to we've done a lot, and it's been a while, but I wanted to end on my personal favorite.
Hell yeah.
Which is magic items.
Ooh, I too enjoy magic items.
Yeah.
It's almost as if that's why I suggested
it. To be fair, it was something that I wanted to do, and it was it's in my the little behind the curtain. This was in my season 4 ideas for what types of episodes we can run in this kind of magic formula. But that's the one I was like, yes, I want to do that at some point because I love magic items. I think they're great.
So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Give me your thoughts.
So, in my honest opinion, at least for D&D Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, game was made for magic items.
Yeah.
I think I've said it before. if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons at all, you gotta have your magic items. You gotta have your bag of holding, your +2 spear of fire, your sending stone, all of that stuff. And I think like the game was kind of always intended to go that way, because a lot of those higher end monsters are usually pretty much resistant to anything that's not magical in some form.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess you could run a campaign with like silvered weapons as being like the primary thing, but everyone loves finding obscure or otherwise special magic items, and I feel like there's a shit ton of ways to use them. I love doing these in my campaigns. In our first campaign, I used a magic item as the MacGuffin, or the thing that drives the plot forward. And in the campaign, you'll remember that you guys went to create the legendary sword, the Dragon Slayer, to stop an evil dragon from taking over the region, finding out that dragon was actually the good guy, and you had been working with the bad one the whole time. It was a good reveal.
My magical MacGuffin subplot.
Yeah. So for those of you who are just tuning in now, Joe and I DM a game with like a group of our friends, and he is one of the players. And we had just, about a year ago, I think, maybe a little less than a year ago, we finished our full-fledged, like, 2-year campaign.
This is
where
crazy.
Your character, who was a cleric, who was initially a thief, kind of turned, holy cleric. You were on this quest to find the horn of your god, who was kind of a trickster-ish god, liked having jovial fun.
He was like a trickster Bacchus type.
Yeah, Loki without the daggers.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love to do is give magic items a bit of personality and lore. I think it's one of my favorite things to do as a world-building dungeon master, is creating something that has a little bit of lore, something that ties them to the world. So this Horn of Gustav, instead of just being a Horn of Valhalla that just creates soldiers for them to use, I made this thing a item that travels from owner to owner, because there were a couple of other little attachments to it. Along with being a horn that summoned allies, it also created food and water, and had a single wish attached to it. But when the wish was used, it would disappear to find its next owner.
Yeah.
And I loved it because it was a sentient item that talked to you and wanted to, help you out when it could. And it was cool because it was this holy quest for you, your personal quest, and it turned out to be this really useful item that you used pretty frequently once you got it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and I also made a joke that it was Cody pulling me into being a DM, kicking and screaming.
Yes, because I did make you control your own allies that you made.
Yep.
Which was super fun to watch you do for like the first couple of times, for sure.
Yeah, I was very boring with them, but anyway. Carrying on, sorry.
No, it's fine, but I think adding a little bit of personality and lore to your items gives them a bit of extra flavor, and it turns that, oh boy, a +2 sword, turns it into something cool and rememberable. I know that doesn't work at all tables, but I've always been on the side of flourish and role-playing and all that stuff, and I feel like adding, even if it's just a little lore, even if it's just like, where it came from or who it was made by, might be something interesting to the players that they might want to explore.
Mm-hmm.
I also believe that the items in the DMG, after playing with them and watching other people use them, they're meant to be templates. I don't think they're necessarily meant to just be the end all be all for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition.
I agree with that.
Because there's so many things it doesn't have that I think are like for instance, your party in our current campaign just acquired a magic sword.
Yeah.
And instead of just doing the boring, you get the fire sword +1 that does fire damage, it has properties that you have that the party hasn't figured out yet, and even with your identify spell have kind of learned that like, oh, there's something more than meets the eye when it comes to this item. Personally, one of the things that I like to do is have kind of level up properties to them. I like magic items that will not eventually be useless for the party. Like, for instance, our party's warlock is basically a human soul dealer. Deals in souls, makes ridiculous wishes fulfilled. In return, they get souls. And she does that with a magical item that's a staff. And the idea of the staff, spoilers for you and for my party who's listening.
I'm not listening. La, la,
la. This staff is going to eventually level up. Like, it's not just going to be this thing that she uses to make deals with. It's eventually going to turn into a spell focus and maybe give her +1 on things, like depending on how well she does in her job of collecting souls, then she's going to have this really cool item that kind of scales with her.
I kind of piecemealed that together.
Right. I mean, it was pretty obvious. I didn't make it something that was super hidden, but like the effects of it are unknown. I'm also part of a campaign where I'm a Hexblade Warlock, and the dungeon master that I play with, who's a friend of ours, gave me this magical sword that while I'm using Hexblade's curse on people, it siphons the souls of the people I fought using that feature. And once per day, I can basically roll the bones and gain like special abilities depending on the souls that I've acquired.
Okay.
So we were fighting a undead wyvern, and I had used that sword, and basically I gained some movement speed and I was given the pounce attack. And then in another battle, I basically got the benefits of rage without the restrictions to like spellcasting. So like I would take less damage from attacks and things like that. And there are so many ways to do magic items, and I think keeping them as their baseline, here's your +1 sword, here's your arrows of fire, you can do it, and that's something you can do, but I think your players will appreciate the love that you put into the game by adding maybe that magic weapon, maybe that +1 mace, it's got a little bit of a personality. Maybe it talks to them. Maybe it's got a predisposition and won't work in its particular ways unless you act in a certain way. You see all of these in a lot of the older editions and things like that, but I love tinkering with magic items. It's basically, in my opinion, the first thing you tinker with, or the easiest thing to tinker with that doesn't totally fuck over the game. Because like...
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, so that's my thoughts. I love magic items, and I love tinkering and messing with them. But what about you?
I think magic items are pretty cool. Let's see. I mean, I guess I have a similar thing to what you were saying, which is I think that they're better with personality. I also think they're better if you can like learn a little bit about them over time, right? Nothing's more boring than it's like, hey, here just it is, like right from the get-go. Here's the I don't know, fucking Sword of Blibliostro, and it's and it can summon the power of 1,000 suns or something.
Damn, that's a lot of power.
It's a pretty good sword, right? But I think it's one of those things, right, where it's one of those you really have to study it and learn about it to unlock some of its powers, right? I think that's more fulfilling for the characters as well. Or, you could do the other thing too, where it's like you have a lore master jump in at some point and give you an inkling of an idea. But I think other things I've enjoyed as a player, because I've not tried my hand at DMing yet. I'll get there eventually, but I think one of my personal favorites was in a campaign I played in college. There was a magical set of gauntlets that became much more powerful when they were a pair. Like, each one had its own individual power, but as a pair, it became like the full potential of its power, which I thought that was kind of neat. It gave you a good idea. It gave me an idea moving forward of things. I really liked the Dragon Slayer, how there was the quest element to it. So you had to get a certain, we had to fulfill a recipe. So there was an added sort of group of questing to it. So it made it feel more meaningful than just kind of a sword. And then right now, the fire sword that you mentioned, I love the idea that we don't know that much about it, right?
Yeah, I did that on purpose, because I do feel like the spell Identify, while it's super useful and it's pretty handy in a normal, quote unquote normal campaign where magic items aren't like a huge thing and you're just looking for the details, but it's such a low level spell that I do feel like Identify should be restricted if it's like super high powerful magic, like, items created by liches or grand wizards or whatever. But like, like an artificer who's, making a stone of sending or whatever, like, yeah, Identify should work to some degree.
Sure. And I think that's kind of the interesting thing too about like the fact that I'm playing an artificer, which means that my class kind of has magical items built into it to a certain degree. And so it's cool that there's kind of like these like levels of magic items as well. So for instance, like I can make the boomerang of hitting, or I can make lightning batons or things like that. And there's a suggestion that these are kind of mundane items. So if you have like legendary epic items, I suppose, if that makes sense, like it makes the world feel bigger and more ancient. And it's the difference between finding, this might sound dumb, but like a penny versus like a very, very rare, valuable penny, right? They're ostensibly the same thing, but the one has so much more story and meaning and power to it.
Right.
Yeah. And then I suppose, as a if I were to ever, try my hand at DMing, which I'm getting closer, and I'm sure that people can follow the through line of that narrative arc, of me promising it for like over a year at this point. I think that it's one of those things where you have to be deliberate, you have to be prepared, and you have to make it something that your players want to seek out and also want to continue using once they have it. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, and like I said, this is our opinion. I'm sure there are dozens of different opinions.
Sure.
Especially because like every table is a little different. I think we have the luxury, if you will, of having a table that's pretty like-minded.
Yeah, we're all kind of like epic fantasy / anime nerds.
Right, and so this might work. This works at our table really well, and for us, it's like it's basically at this point the golden standard. But that doesn't mean that your table of people who are just coming to roll dice and smash goblins are gonna feel the same way. So it's kind of definitely read the room before putting a lot of this energy in, because like it would suck to put all this energy and like the party's just like cool, whatever, and then like throws it in their bag of holding or whatever.
That's fair. All right.
Yeah,
good point.
Yeah.
All right, shall we wrap her up?
Yeah, that was a good season 4.
I think so. Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to season 4. As always, we are going to be doing our little kind of sort of hiatus thing. But we want to listen so much we want to thank you so much for listening. We're going to be going into season 5 shortly.
Yes.
With all kinds of fun things awaiting, and we have a couple fun special episodes in there, and I'm personally pretty excited. So,
me too. And then we're gonna not next week, but the week after, we're gonna do a little mini episode where we talk about all of the, basically what's to come for Fandom Roulette, and basically give you an idea of the stuff you'll hear from each sections and kind of what's going to we like to do little oddball episodes where we break the norm and bring people on or talk about very specific things. Halloween's coming up, so our infamous Halloween episode will be coming up, and
ooh, I'm already scared.
Ooh. And it's so spooky. And so
what bad impressions will Joe do this year?
Ooh, yes, I love it.
Oh, I just got handed a pink slip. I'm fired.
Oh no!
Just kidding.
Love.
There was a smiley face inside of it. But anyway, yeah.
So yes, we will be getting into that in our mini episode. So stay tuned.
Yeah, thumbs up. All right, signing off for Fandom Roulette and Season 4. This is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And as always, stay nerdy.
Stay super nerdy.